Hello, how are you doing? We are getting into the thick of book prize season, and today I'm going to talk about a very special award, the Rathbones Folio Prize. So I'm going to talk about the titles nominated for this year's awards and why I'm so interested in this prize. And it's a very special year for the book award because they have a new structure. So there are three different categories of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. Winners will be chosen in each of those categories, and then from those three winners, an overall winner will be chosen for the prize. And I don't know how the judges are going to decide between fiction and nonfiction and poetry. I mean, they're such different things, but it's an interesting exercise, and it's what the Costa Book Awards used to do, but that prize doesn't run any longer. Now, if you've not heard of the Rathbones Folio Prize before, this is an award open to all literature written in English and published in the UK in the past year. Nominations are chosen by the Folio Academy. The Folio Academy is an international group of people, primarily made up of writers and critics. So this is a book award very much of peers celebrating each other. And I think it's really interesting in that way because I assume that they're not just looking at story and subject matter and voice, but also narrative style and technique and language that is used to create this literature. So 60 entries are chosen by the Academy, and then the judges are able to call in a further 20 entries, and then the judges choose from those a short list of 5 books in each category. Now, the judges for this year's book award are also really exciting, and it's a stellar group of people. You have Ali Smith, Jackie Kay, and Guy Ganarantne, who wrote the novel In Our Mad and Furious City. And I have a very special relationship and memories of Ali Smith and Jackie Kay because a long time ago, I went to a reading at the Royal Festival Hall in London where Ali Smith and Jackie Kay were talking together about short stories. So I have this collection of her wonderfully titled The Whole Story and Other Stories, and I've kept in it my ticket from that event in 2003 when I saw them speaking together. They're both such inspiring, wonderful people. Obviously, Ali Smith wrote the amazing Seasonal Quartet and How to Be Both, and lots of other great novels and collections of short stories. Jackie Kay is the author of the fantastic memoir Red Dust Road, as well as the novel Trumpet, and other works of short story collections and books of poetry. So yeah, just real fantastic group of judges. I really trust their taste in literature, so I'm very excited about the nominations that they've chosen. And here are all the titles shortlisted for this year's awards. I'm trying to get my exercise in, lifting all of these books. The Rathbones Folio Prize kindly sent me all of the shortlisted titles, so I'm going to go through and talk about why each of these books I think sound really good and interesting. I've only read a few of them, so I'm really eager to get to more of them. The winners will be announced on March 27th, so just in a few weeks' time. Each category winner will receive £2,000, and then the overall winner will receive £30,000. I don't know why there's such a big difference in the prize amounts and totals between them. I think it would be better if they were a bit more evenly distributed, but for whatever reason they've organized it in that way. So I'm going to go through and talk about each of these books. Starting off with the fiction category and with a novel that I have read, which is Glory by NoViolet Bulawayo. Now, I read this last summer before the nominations for the Booker Prize came out, and it went on to be shortlisted for that award, and I was completely captured by the imagination and the language used in this story about a fictional African nation called Jadada, and the residents of that nation with their many different opinions and a military coup, which starts at the very beginning of the novel, and then the difficulty of trying to build a new government and society out of that turmoil. And all of the characters in this are animals, and so it's very playful and funny, but also dealing with the serious side of war and disagreements that occur in a society, especially a modern society, when there's a lot of online chatter going on. And I was really captured by how this becomes a much more personal story, like about halfway through, of a character that returns to this nation after having left it a long time ago. And so yeah, I just really enjoyed the imagination and power of this story. Scary Monsters by Michelle de Kretzer. This is a really tricksy novel in that it's a story that is in two parts. One is set in a kind of dystopian future, and the other is set in the 1980s, but both the stories revolve around themes to do with migration and monsters, and the monsters that it's discussing in this books are racism, misogyny, and ageism. And it's tricksy in that it's in two parts, and so you begin one part, but then halfway through the text flips upside down, and you can start the book on either section, and that'll obviously change your understanding and conception of the story as a whole, but it's just a different way of approaching storytelling and fiction, which is so interesting. Obviously something that Judge Ali Smith is very interested in too, and she wrote her novel How to Be Both, and how she handled it in the publication of that was some of the books that were published started in one place, and then some of the books started in another place. So yeah, it's a really interesting way of approaching narrative. Pure Color by Sheila Heti. Now this is a really tricky novel to describe, as I've not read it yet. I've watched and read a number of reviews about it, but I still don't entirely understand what this novel is about. I think there's a central female character that moves away to study, that meets another woman who has a lot of influence on her, and also how she goes through the death of her beloved father. But it is also described as a contemporary Bible, an atlas of feeling, and a shape-shifting epic. So what I'm actually going to get from this reading experience, I'm not entirely sure, but I think that's really exciting, and it makes me even more interested to read the book, to discover what it's actually all about. Emergency by Daisy Hildyard. This is a novel I've heard really great things about, and which I'm really interested in, which is about a woman living in rural Yorkshire who is under lockdown and recalling her childhood and her early years. But it is also about how the nature and the world around her is being influenced by larger global events. So it's a new kind of pastoral novel which takes into account a lot of ecological issues. Another novel very much dealing with lockdown from the recent pandemic is Lucy by the Sea by Elizabeth Strout, in which we follow Elizabeth Strout's hero Lucy Barton, who she's written about in a few previous books, in a time immediately before the pandemic, when her ex-husband comes to collect her because he realizes what a big deal this pandemic is going to be. So takes her to the state of Maine to kind of hunker down throughout it, and then we follow their relationship as it continues to evolve and change, and Lucy reflects on her life and past, and very much things to do with their family and their daughters, and it's such a moving and beautiful novel, and I can't extract myself from the way that I read and experienced this book, which which was to read it aloud in its entirety to my husband while we were in a road trip in America. So just sharing in the story in that way, it really brought it to life. It really brought out a lot of the humor. So there were a lot of parts where we were laughing together, other parts where we were gasping because something surprising would happen in the story. And it is just so beautifully written, and it's written in this very down-to-earth style, but which contains a lot of profound and moving aspects of our lives. And also to say, I don't think you need to have read the previous books to enjoy and appreciate this novel, but of course you will get more out of it because coming into this with already a lot of knowledge and understanding of the character of Lucy Barton. Now looking at the books nominated for the nonfiction category, and there is The Passengers by Will Ashlin, a very colorful book, and between the years 2018 and 2021, the author traveled around the British Isles interviewing a number of different people from all different levels and corners of society. Also interviewed some people over the internet and over the phone, and collected all these different voices to create a narrative and an overall look of the society as it currently stands over the course of a few years, which is a really interesting way of looking at community in a large scale and how it's made up of so many different individual voices. Just recently I read the wonderful nonfiction book Ossebol, which was looking at a Swedish village and collecting all the different voices from that. So it sounds very similar to that, and it'll be a really interesting way of looking at contemporary Britain. In Love by Amy Bloom. I know this memoir is gonna make me cry, because in the year 2020, Amy Bloom traveled to Switzerland with her husband because his health had deteriorated so badly that they had both decided to end his life. So it's looking at that very difficult process about his difficulties and struggles with Alzheimer's in the final years of his life, and how it's an act of mercy and love to do what they did. The Escape Artist by Jonathan Friedland. This is a book about Rudolf Verba and Fred Wetzler, who were prisoners in Auschwitz, and in April 1944 they were the first prisoners to escape from this camp and the Nazi, and Rudolf had a very good memory, so after they escaped he compiled a very detailed report which made its way to the leaders of the Allied nations and helped them and encouraged their decision to join in this fight and to overcome the Nazis. So it was an incredibly important figure, obviously a very harrowing journey, and so it recounts that story as well as the difficulty he experienced in the aftermath of escaping the camp. Constructing a Nervous System by Margot Jefferson. This is a memoir where the author is reflecting on her life and how she's been influenced by issues to do with race and gender, but has also been influenced by so many luminaries, different writers and artists and musicians and athletes, and how these have all filtered into who she is and made up her perspective and understanding of the world. I've been so eager to read this book because I read and really appreciated her book Negro Land, and yeah, she's just such an interesting and insightful writer. And then we have The Social Distance Between Us by Darren McGarvey. This is a book about politics in modern day Britain and how there is a wide gap between those who have a voice and the voiceless, how a lot of our political leaders are very far removed from the people that they're meant to be representing and serving, and distanced from the issues which they are making policies about. So a very topical and relevant book. And finally, there are the 5 titles in the poetry category. So first off, there's a debut poetry collection called Quiet by Victoria Adukwe Bully. And in this collection, she looks at issues to do with her personal history, with Black interiority, with intimacy, and with selfhood. And also this seeming conflict to do with people who are naturally quiet and who want to guard that sense of an interior life, but also how that can sometimes come into conflict when we need to speak up, because as Audre Lorde says, your silence will not protect you. Ephemeron by Fiona Benson. This is a poetry collection which is in part about poems to do with things in our lives which are transitory and short-lived, whether those are insects or moments from our childhood or moments when we're parenting. Also, there's a long extended poem in this, which is a retelling of a Greek myth about the Minotaur, but told from the point of view of the Minotaur's mother, Pasiphae. So this poem has been nominated for awards, and of course has been lots of works around retellings of Greek myths, which I love to see. Cane, Corn, and Gully by Safia Kamaria Kinshasa. This is a really interesting sounding collection. So the author is both a poet as well as a dancer and a choreographer. She was born in Britain, but she was raised in Barbados. And in this collection, she tries to combine language and movement. So you get poems, but you also get some diagrams that try to explore movement and issues to do with the past and present and the Black female body. There's one poem that is called Marilyn Monroe is the Bogeyman. England's Green by Zaffar Kunial. This is a collection looking at the natural world and the environment in Great Britain, but also issues to do with his parents and his personal history and cricket, and but the history of literature also, and the Brontes. And I read this collection recently, and it is so powerful how he looks at language and dissects language and looks at different possible personal histories, and he almost gives this like three-dimensional view of words and in a way of taking them apart and understanding them from a different perspective. It's really profound and moving. He's such an incredible writer who has been much lauded before. Last year, he was a recipient of one of the Wyndham Campbell Prizes, and if you've not heard of that book award, it's one of the wealthiest book awards in the world. Each recipient is awarded $165,000. So yeah, an incredible and moving poet. And the final poetry collection is Mannerism by Yomi Shode. You can see on the cover from the blurb that one of the judges, Jackie Kay, is definitely a fan of this author. These are poems to do with Black British men and boys and issues surrounding masculinity and misrepresentations in the British media. And they're poems to do with class and a sense of belonging. And yeah, I've heard also really great things about this book. So those are the titles in each of the categories up for this year's award. Yeah, I have only read a few of these books, so I'm hoping to read more. I'll probably first read Pure Color and Constructing a Nervous System, because I've been really eager to get to these titles and haven't had copies of them before, but also hoping to read some more poetry, because I don't often read all that much poetry, and I've been really wanting to. But let me know in the comments below if you're keen on reading any of these books, or if you have read any of these books. Let me know your thoughts about them. If you have any opinions about which titles you think should win the different categories, but it'll be interesting to see when the winners are announced on March 27th. So thank you for watching. I hope you're reading good things, and I will speak to you again very soon. Bye bye.